The intake form said Supplemental Technical Observer. The Veth-Koral Institute's administrative system said Authorized for passive monitoring only, non-participatory. Assessor Warden Vanek said nothing to me directly. He said something to his senior cadet, Veth-Koral, in a tonal register I couldn't read, and Veth-Koral pointed at the anteroom without making eye contact. That was fine. I'd been pointed at worse anterooms. The Veth-Koral Deep Systems Institute trains hull-rated operators, not pilots, not officers. The people who go outside the ship when the ship is dying, cut into pressure housings while the atmosphere is still venting, and work until the job is done or they aren't there anymore. The Institute's assessment environment is the thing they're proudest of, a pressurized replica of a Kel-Ardak deep transit hull, decommissioned class, sealed inside a testing volume the size of a mid-range cargo bay. It runs an automated failure sequence, atmosphere bleed from Sector 3, gravity inversion in the forward ring, structural microfracture propagation through the secondary skin. The hull's resonance array reads the subject's cortisol cascade, neural stress indicators, respiratory deviation, and a handful of other physiological signals I don't have the biology to name. The point of the hull is to produce fear and measure how long it takes to produce incapacitation. I'd been told this by Veth-Koral in the anteroom. He'd said it the way you'd explain a very dangerous thing to someone who needed to understand they should be concerned. He had 8 limbs and a bioluminescent shoulder ridge that went amber when he was speaking for emphasis. I'd nodded. I'd asked if there was anywhere to leave my bag. He'd gone a color that wasn't amber. They hadn't sent me in to be assessed. That was the thing. A misfiling in the Inter-Institute Observer Program had routed me as a passive technical monitor. I was supposed to stand in the exterior observation bay and watch the cadet going through the hull sequence that afternoon. The cadet had developed a pressure injury 2 days prior and been pulled. Nobody had updated the access log. When I presented my badge at the anteroom entry, the system read me as the scheduled participant and unlocked the interior door. Vanek caught the error 11 minutes after I'd gone in. I didn't know any of this at the time. I just knew the door behind me had sealed, and the anteroom was empty, and the corridor in front of me smelled like recycled atmosphere and old pressure seal compound, which is the same thing corridors smell like when you're doing primary hull work on a decommissioned transit vessel in the Kepler-12 salvage belt, which is where I'd spent 11 years of my career. I looked at the corridor. I looked at the seal flanges on the wall panels. The secondary skin bonding on the third panel from my right had been installed at the wrong torque rating. You could see it if you knew what to look for. The compression band was slightly proud of the flange housing, not dangerous at ambient pressure, probably fine in the assessment sequence too. Still wrong. I had a multi-tool on my belt because I always have a multi-tool on my belt. I checked the torque rating, found what I expected to find, corrected it. Took about 4 minutes. I noted it in the maintenance log I keep as a habit from field work and moved down the corridor. The atmosphere bleed hit Sector 3 around the 16-minute mark. The resonance array was in the ceiling. I'd spotted the emitter nodes when I came in. Small oblate housings recessed above the panel line. I knew what they were, because the Kel-Ardak class used the same resonance emission design for their proximity hazard alert system, and I'd worked 2 Kel-Ardak hulls during the Kepler-12 contracts. The array was scanning me. I could hear the subsonic carrier frequency under the alarm tones. I ignored it and suited up the sector seal. There's a rhythm to atmospheric event response that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with which parts of the system are downstream from the breach. You seal the bleed point, you verify the primary and secondary closure, you check the return flow on the adjacent panels to confirm the event is contained. Then you note the cause, because a bleed doesn't happen without a cause, and if you don't find the cause, you'll be back for the next one. The cause here was a fractured emitter housing in the atmosphere distribution line. Not part of the assessment sequence, a real fault. Recent, based on the particulate scatter pattern. I fixed it with a spare coupling from my kit, because I carry spare couplings, and logged it for the Institute's maintenance division. I was in Sector 3 for 22 minutes. The atmosphere bleed was contained in about 9 of those. The rest was the fault investigation and the repair. The gravity inversion in the forward ring was the part the exterior observers apparently found difficult to watch. I found out later that the assessment protocol gives cadets a 9-minute window in the forward ring, The ring inverts gravity by 40% in alternating 2-meter sections. You get a disorientation effect that's meant to simulate hull rotation in a tumble event. The resonance array measures vestibular stress response. I'd worked a tumble event in the Kepler-12 belt in my 3rd year, a decommissioned colony transport, 40-degree spin, 2-person team, 6 hours. The forward ring of the assessment hull was set at 40% and wasn't actually spinning, which made it easier, not harder. I crossed it in what I later learned was 4 minutes and 11 seconds. In the middle of the crossing, I noticed the gravity calibration in Section 6 was running about 3% high, not part of the assessment protocol either, a calibration drift. I flagged it on the comm. There was a pause on the comm, a long one. Then Vanic's voice said, in translated standard, "What are you reporting?" "Gravity calibration drift in forward ring, Section 6, I said, "running about 3% high. Not dangerous at current load, but you'll want to look at it before you put a cadet with inner ear sensitivity through this sequence." Another pause. "Noted," he said. I filed a maintenance recommendation in my log and kept moving. The structural breach simulation in the secondary skin was the last part of the sequence. The hull fires a controlled microfracture propagation through the outer panel layer, creates a visible breach pattern, audible event, and drops the local atmosphere pressure by about 6% over 90 seconds. The resonance array reads panic response. The assessment is designed around the assumption that cadets, at this point, have been through the atmosphere bleed and the gravity ring, and the accumulated physiological stress load makes the breach simulation the breaking point. I patched it. I had materials in my kit. I'd have felt strange not patching it. The patch took about 7 minutes. It wasn't perfect, a field patch rarely is, but it held and it sealed, and the pressure drop reversed. I noted the panel number and the fracture propagation pattern in my log, in case the Institute's engineering division wanted the data. Then I sat down against the wall in Sector 4, because the sequence was apparently over, and I'd been on my feet for the better part of an hour and a half. The comm opened. "The assessment sequence has concluded," Vanek said. "I know," I said. "The resonance array shut off about 3 minutes ago." The pause this time was the longest yet. "You identified the array shutdown. Same emitter design as the proximity hazard system on the Kel-Ardak class. I've worked 2 of them. The carrier frequency drops about 4 Hz when it cycles down." He said something off-comm that the translator didn't catch. Then, "The door to the anteroom is open." "Thank you," I said. "I've got a maintenance log for your engineering division. 3 items. Panel torque correction in the main corridor, atmosphere distribution fault in Sector 3, calibration drift in the forward ring. I'd say 4th item is the patch in Sector 4, but your team will want to replace the panel properly. Field patch is good for maybe 30 cycles at assessment pressure before you'd want to check it." No response for a moment. "4 items, Vanek said. 4 items. I picked up my kit and walked out. He filed for instrument recalibration that afternoon. The resonance array's assessment log from my session showed a 94-minute runtime and no stress cascade data of any kind. No cortisol signal, no vestibular deviation, no respiratory event. The array had been running correctly. There just hadn't been anything for it to find. The recalibration came back clean. The maintenance division confirmed all 4 repair items from my log and assigned work orders for the panel replacement and the calibration correction. The Institute's exterior observation gallery had been running at full capacity during my session. 17 cadets from the senior cohort, watching the resonance array readout from above. Velo Sathdren's shoulder ridge had gone a color, I was told, that nobody in the observation gallery had a word for. The hull had been designed to simulate the worst version of the job. It had done that. It just turned out I hadn't noticed the difference.